Mantling is a mechanic that allows you, while over the abyss, to latch onto any open ground wall and boost yourself up to safety. It's easily performed by simply colliding into a wall you wish to mantle, and you do not need to press spacebar or perform any other input for it to work. Honestly, this mechanic hasn't been given much thought, but I'm gonna tell you a little secret. It's pretty OP if you know how to use it. First, I'd like to give you some knowledge on how a mantle works. There are two main phases, the first being when your character touches the wall and receives an initial increase in vertical acceleration, and the second being a decrease in acceleration that smooths your momentum and prevents you from flying into the sky. But wouldn't it be cool if we could keep the momentum gained from mantling? Recall back to my previous video on feathering and you'll remember that at the apex of your glide and when your character model fills the bright glowing orb above your head, you're supposed to release your glider to preserve the momentum built during your ascent. To perform what I call a mantle jump, tap and hold your glide key for a split second before the apex of your mantle, and then release your glide key at the same time you would for a traditional feather. Doing so cancels the deceleration phase of a mantle and shoots us into the air with similar height. If you want to practice this tech, there's a really great place in the practice range. Once you spawn, walk over to the top right of the hub platform and find these two green shipping containers. Here, attempt to clear these two boxes with the mantle jump without touching said boxes. If you perform this tech perfectly, you should not need to glide over the crates. If you're struggling to get this tech down, here are a few things to keep in mind. The timing of your glider being deployed and then retracted is extremely specific. You want to make sure that you aren't pressing your key too early or releasing it too late. You kind of need to find that sweet spot in between. On top of this, when nearing the apex of your mantle, try slightly backing away from the wall to avoid clipping your feet off of the ground and to give yourself a little bit of forward momentum going into the jump. Oh, and one more thing I want to mention. Contrary to feathering, at a certain point there is a diminishing return on how high you can get with this tech relative to how deep into the abyss you started your mantle. From my experience, I've been able to clear most of the jumps I showcase in my feathering video, just by falling halfway into the abyss. Also, opposed to feathering, mantle jumping gives people less time to react, making it harder for them to spike you. Now, that's not to say that feathering doesn't still have its own use cases, and honestly, this is more of an additional trick to use in your gameplay rather than a replacement for feathering in its entirety. Moving on though, what if I told you there were more ways mantling could be used to get even higher into the air? First, we need to understand that in Supervive there are a few abilities that float, or put simply, they prevent Y-axis movement while they are being cast and preserve some of the momentum applied to your character while being cast. To test if an ability holds such traits, there's a simple experiment you can do. Find any ledge and then walk into the abyss while casting your ability. If your character hovers during the cast time instead of immediately dropping into the abyss, then your character's ability floats. Make sure not to mix this up with abilities that reset Y-axis velocity like Celeste or Hudson Dash. If you're familiar with the health pack tech for either character, you may be inclined to think that this is possible through mantling as well. Unfortunately, mantling in either ability will just cancel your dash entirely, so it's just not possible. As of recording this video, I know of 8 characters for a total of 10 abilities capable of consistently utilizing mantling as a means to gain height. Going down the list, let's start with Brall, who can use both his RMB and ultimate for this tech. Starting with RMB, you must utilize the aerial part of the attack first, then drop off the side of a ledge, and then press RMB again right before mantling. Doing so will give you a decent amount of height, certainly enough to get over tier 2 walls. For his ultimate, cast it right before going into any mantle and, similar to his RMB, you'll be shot into the air. However, this version will give Brall significantly more elevation due to the cast time of the ability being longer. You can see that combined with Abyss Specialist, this is even enough height to get from one teleporter to the next in the practice range. Moving on though, let's take a look at Jin, who utilizes this tech slightly differently. For Jin, falling deep into the abyss actually hinders his ability to get any height at all. Flip Slash, as the ability is called, functions in a similar manner to mantling itself, applying an initial burst in vertical acceleration while also decelerating the character towards the apex of the flip. For this reason, diving too deep into the abyss during your mantle will cause the ability to execute while still enforcing a mantle's deceleration phase. To cancel both mantle and Flip Slash's deceleration phases, make sure your mantle is very shallow, and to cast the ability right before touching the wall. Doing so will give you enough height to scale tier 2 walls. Now, these two are useful, but Joule's capabilities, I argue, are far more interesting, albeit harder to execute. Using the momentum preserved during her shift, trail into a mantleable wall and then immediately release the key after colliding with the wall. If done correctly, Joule will receive both the mantle acceleration during her shift and a sudden burst in vertical acceleration at the end. Just like Brall though, Joule is also able to use mantling to increase her height during her ult. In similar fashion, ult right before mantling and you'll see her rocket into the air like a spaceship. With the given height, she too can traverse the entire practice range and go from one teleporter to the next. Moving on to Shrike, a character that hasn't had much going for her for a while now, is also capable of mantle boosting. Simply channel your shift right before you're about to mantle and you'll be propelled into the air diagonally, similar to Joule, allowing for some pretty interesting escapes and plays. Moving on, let's take a look at two characters at the same time. Bishop and Felix's use of mantle boosting is, in my opinion, the hardest to execute. Both require extremely specific timings and accurate character placement for them to work. So, before showing you how to do them, I need you to understand how your character weaves their movement ability into an ultimate. First, find 2 points on the map that you can use to measure distance. Then, shift in one direction and immediately ult. The distance you've moved is how far you should be away from the mantleable wall before performing this tech. Now that you know that, let me showcase it in action. On Bishop, fall into the abyss with the same distance from the wall that you recorded in the previous test. When you are halfway into the abyss, shift towards the wall and activate your ultimate. Timing this just right will give you a mantle boost with your ult, letting you take off into the air like a plane. For Felix, mantle boosting works the exact same way. Keep this note in mind though, ulting into the wall at too harsh of an angle can cancel your ultimate and cause this tech to fail, so a general rule of thumb is to ult parallel to the wall itself. Now you may be thinking, Beebo can probably do this too, right? Unfortunately, he can't. Beebo's ultimate locks you to the cart itself, which remains on the ground during its duration. A way to test which ultimates do and don't lock you to the ground is to grab a launch pad, place it in front of you, and ult through it. If you go flying into the air, it can be used to mantle boost. Otherwise, you're best saving it for some enemies. Finally, we're going to look at the last two characters, Shiv and Void. When Shiv throws out her dagger, any momentum applied to her is preserved. That means that teleporting after mantling will shoot her into the air thanks to the boost in momentum she received during a mantle. Void's shift functions the same way, although it's a little difficult to time because his movement during the cast is so restricted. So instead of using it normally, start falling into the abyss, and then, at about halfway to the death box, cast the ability and immediately activate your glider for a brief second to cancel the animation. This will allow you to move like normal and time your mantle so that when your shift lands on the ground, you immediately shoot into the air with maximum velocity. That pretty much wraps everything up though. If you want to learn more Supervive tech, why not check out this little video? And if you want to catch me live, come say hello on Twitch. I'll be streaming every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday night at 7 Eastern Standard Time. Anyways though, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night, and as always, I hope to see you in the Skylands.